we are now moving into the rest of the presentation, which is about building engaging and personalized search experience using modern search PnP web parts. This is a little bit different, a bit of a departure from some of our past topics because it is a little bit more technical. But we're going to go through. I have some slides, and then we'll spend some time in a demo environment and show you what we can do with it. All right. But ask questions, please.
Yeah, please.
All right, so what
Chris,
is it?
I think Chris won like the past. He's won a couple times. Chris, feel free to ask a question and win again, buddy. But
Yes.
yeah, other people, like, I see some new names on the list here. Please ask questions, guys.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, since you mentioned some of the folks that are in the session, these are basically the open source. If you're a Valo customer, if you have Valo intranet, I just wanted to mention this up front. The Valo search web parts are really derived from a previous version of the PnP search web parts. So pretty much everything that I'm going to show in this presentation, you can do with Valo, and the primary difference there is with Valo you have support. Everything I'm showing here is open source, so we'll just leave it there and then move forward. Okay, so what is it? What is PnP Modern Search Web Parts? It's a set of SharePoint SPFX web parts that allows administrators to create custom and flexible search-based experiences in SharePoint Modern. Okay, so if some of you are familiar with classic SharePoint, you know that there was a search content search web part, and there was a refiner web part. Those never really materialized in modern, and this was the open source solution to fill that gap. And also, if you don't know, the PnP team is a community group, but it's organized by Microsoft. So everything's open source. I assume at some point in the future that the PnP search web parts are going to be officially supported by Microsoft, but don't quote me on that. So it's really composed of 4 web parts. So search results web part, search filters, search verticals, and search box. And I'm going to describe most of those today. Again, it's open source, maintained by the PnP team. It was first released in 2019. The current version, which I believe was released at the end of December, early January, is version 4, was written from the ground up because it was now has the capability of leveraging the new Microsoft Search APIs instead of just the SharePoint Search APIs. The slide deck will be provided. There's links to everything, so don't worry about any of that stuff. Here's our PnP mascot. His name is Parker the porcupine, the PnP partner, the porcupine. He's cute. All right, moving on. How do we get started? These are just links that I provided to you. Download the latest release. Essentially, there's 2 SPPKG files. There are 2 downloads. You upload those to your app catalog and deploy them, and then the solutions are available throughout your entire tenant. Okay, very well documented at that link, and there's also kind of a rich community-driven support, I guess, community that's on their GitHub. Supported browsers. This is a big one. All the modern browsers, not Internet Explorer 11. So if you have users on IE 11, doesn't play nice. It's not. So basically, they've said, the group has said that they make their best effort to support IE 11, but it broke at the end of, or one of the last releases of 3.0, and then it's not working at all in 4.0. So I just say it doesn't work in IE 11, but Microsoft's dropping support for IE 11 in M365 at the end of this year, regardless. So not a big deal. All right, so here are our web parts. These are the web parts that come with the solution. So you have a search results web part. It basically receives data and then renders it using a specific layout. So search filters is basically your refiners. So what this can do is connect to a search results web part, and it will display metadata related to the search results in a format that you can then drill down into and pare down your search results to find exactly what you're looking for. Search verticals lets you essentially have an on-page navigation to change the type of data that you're searching for. And I'll show you some examples of this. But basically, if you remember with SharePoint Classic, you had like a enterprise search center, you had a search box, and then underneath there, you had a search navigation interface that had like everything, people, conversations. I can't remember what the other ones were. And then you can customize that. This is the same thing. So it's basically letting you set what those search verticals are. And it does even more than that. And then, of course, the search box. The search box is pretty much where you put your search query. Now, you can use the search results web part without a search box by just putting your query right into that web part, which we'll show you in a second. So once you deploy the packages to your app catalog, you go to a site, you go add a web part, you should see these 4 web parts available in your web part toolbox. I don't know what we call this, web part selector box. There's probably a real name for it. Okay, so search results web part is basically the main piece, or the main piece of main web part. So that's kind of where everything is based. So it can be used alone or it can be connected to other web parts, so you can have more rich experiences. I mentioned earlier, you can connect it to filters or verticals or a search box. So there's 4 main components, and I'm going to cover 3 of those today. Extensibility is if you want to do some customizations. Basically, it asks for essentially 3 things. One is what your data source is. Where is the data coming from, and what type of data do you want to display in this web part? So there's a visual user interface where you can select the information, but there's also lets you use a KQL, which is standard Microsoft querying language to get your data. So if you wanted to say, show me all the documents from this site and that are this content type, you can do that. Show me all the news in the hub, you can do that too. So there's a little bit of reference material that you need if you don't know how to build KQL queries, but there's some tools online that will help with that. Layouts is basically how you want to render the data. So now we have the data from the data source. How do we want to render it? That's where layouts come in. There are, I think, 5 or 6 built-in layouts. And one of them is like a grid, a slider, a details, a list, and then there's a special one for people. So if you want to display, users in there, there's a special display template for people. And then any of those built-in templates can be customized. So they're customized using, I'm going to come back to that. Actually, let me, a little bit out of order here. Okay, so talking about layouts. Actually, sorry, let's do this first. So tokens. So what tokens do is they help you build more dynamic queries. So I can make a query just like the ones I mentioned, show me all the documents in the site with the path this. But I can also use these tokens or these token formats to customize that and make it dynamic. So for example, if I wanted to say, show me all of the documents that I created, I can actually say, make a query that says created, and then in curly braces, user. And that would actually take from the context of my session, it would actually pass that in and it would show me my documents. And I'll have examples of that. So you can see that you can create very dynamic and personalized experiences here. Another example, maybe you want on a department page on an intranet site, you want to display all of the people that work in that department. So you can actually create a query that says, department : and then maybe take the title of the page and pass that into the query, and then it would only show you the users that have the department equal to the title of the page. Okay. All right. So really powerful stuff. I know it's a little bit looks scary, but it's really not. Of course, there's also really the date. Tokens are really important too, because then you can do date-based queries as well. Okay. All right. layout. So this is what I was looking towards. So we have basically, just like the Valo web parts, the PnP web parts use handlebars, which is a templating open source library. Basically uses HTML-based templates to render some type of content. So I provided a link to some information about templating there, and you can always go to handlebars.js. Everything is well documented there. The point, most importantly, is how many are here? Really 5 base templates can all be customized. So you can go to the details list, and then you can go into the actual HTML for that list and customize it. Say you wanted to add another field, or you wanted to change the size, or how many columns of data there are, or whatever it is. You can do all that with HTML and CSS. Okay. All right. And these are just some examples. There's a cards layout, details list, slider, and people. So next we have the search filters web part. So this would be, more commonly known as the refiner web part. So what this allows us to do is basically filter the current results that are loaded into the SharePoint search results box. So essentially, I can say I want to filter by, let's say, author or document type, or what site a document's in. Those can all be configured in this edit filters interface here. And then you have some choices on how those are rendered, either by a checkbox, a date, a range, radio buttons, or just a drop down. So you have some choices there. And you can also set what the operator is, so you can do an and or. So you have a lot of flexibility in how those queries are created. Okay. Questions on that? Good. Okay. All right. And then lastly is the search verticals web part. So what the search verticals web part does, I think I mentioned it earlier, but it basically lets you create different silos of search results. So, and in a way, it works in a very similar manner to the Valo tab web part, where you're showing and hiding web parts on a page based on what tab you're on. This works very similar to that, but it's more integrated into the actual web parts, to where it can actually show the number of results in each area. And I'll be able to show some better examples of that as well. You can also create a search vertical that will link out to an external interface, or either in SharePoint or outside of SharePoint. So for example, if you had a say ServiceNow or some ticketing system or whatever it is, you can create an external link, so you can type in a search query, and then you can send that query to a different page. So that's another way to use search verticals. All right, and lastly is the search box. So for the most part, there's not too much to do here. There are some options with how you want to connect to the other web parts, if you want to navigate to a different page when a search query is sent. But I think the most important piece of this is if you want to pull in, say, a query string parameter from the URL and pass that as a query. So for example, if you were linking to a page and you wanted to pass, say, department equals marketing in the URL, you can actually pull the query string from the URL and pass that to the query. So that's really the most important piece of the configuration for the search box. Okay.